Hello everyone and welcome to my very first video about Unreal Engine. My name is David and today I will show you the top 10 tips that I'm using on a daily basis while working on productions. As a very first tip, one of the most useful one in my opinion is that when you move in Unreal with right-click WASD, as you would do in any video games, most of them actually, you can move your camera pretty fast. When you are at 0.8 of the camera speed, you can change the camera speed directly in that menu. But let's say that you are working on some arrows like this, and you duplicate it and you place it there, and that you want to move closer and you don't want to get to the camera speed menu all the time. Well, there's a very simple way to do so. While you are moving, it's important because it's only while you are moving, you can roll the wheel of your mouse up to go fast and down to go slower. So let's say that I want to get to those little arrow right there. I can just simply roll the mouse button, the mouse wheel, to get closer. And if I want to get elsewhere, I can just move like this. Second tip is when you have your sequencer on, like so, and you place your camera in some places like this, and you have an animation to do, or you need to place something but you don't want to use your camera from the sequencer. So one thing that I do is basically you go there, you change your layout for the two panes. So now I have 2 times the same viewport. The thing is, if I click on the little camera in the sequencer, I will have this camera right here, and this one has allow cinematic control turned off. If it's turned on, if I click on this, both are the same viewport. But if I uncheck the allow cinematic control, then I have my free camera here. I can go there and just move stuff around without actually moving my camera, and that's pretty useful when you want to have something physically accurate in the world. So let's say I want to put them very on the ground. Now I would have normally have to check here and play like this, and here we go. But now I see that it's not exactly on the ground. So if I move it up, here we go. It's all good. And my camera doesn't move. Tip number 3. Sometimes you will work on a very large scene or heavy scenes, and it can become very hard to work on the viewport. So when you create a camera, most of the time you will have your camera preview on the bottom right corner of your viewport, which actually add an additional render to your viewport. So it's like you are rendering 2 times your viewport. So that can be expensive on performance. So in order to tweak with that is you go into Editor Preferences, and under Camera Preview, you have 2 options: Preview Selected Cameras or Camera Preview Size, which is used to actually reduce the camera if you want to maybe it to take less place in your viewport. I usually uncheck Preview Selected Camera because I don't want to see the preview in my viewport and affect my performance. Tip number 4. So when you are using a camera in the sequencer, or you want to create a cinematic or any render, what you will want to do is to actually have a camera that fit the ratio that you want. So if you look here on this camera here, I have a 16:9 digital film, but the ratio of the screen, if let's say I change it like this is not 16:9. This is very small. So I want to have my viewport to follow the ratio that I'm recording in. So in order to do so, you go into the camera options of your camera and you check constraint aspect ratio. This is by default. It's supposed to be on, but it happened that it was not. So now the aspect ratio is locked to the viewport. So if I change the size of my viewport, the aspect ratio stays 16:9. And if I change it to like super 35mm, it's the same thing. If I change it, it stays the same. Tip number 5. It's a tip that I usually use for for reviews, for iterations. There's an option that you can go to your cine camera and you can just lock it, so no transforms. But you can go into your cine camera actor in your outliner and simply go to transforms and lock actor movement. So you will not, I'm actually clicking right now, you will not move your camera anymore. So the other thing that is worth mentioning is when you are working, I personally worked in a VFX industry with Unreal Engine. When you actually work with iteration, you will send versions in dailies and blah blah blah. So basically you want to have the same image twice to be able to compare with the changes that you've made. One with the before the changes and one other after the changes. What I usually do is I hit F9 in the viewport. So you can see at the bottom right screen, you can see that it saved a screenshot. Then I open Natron to compare my screenshots. It's a useful tool that looks really much like Nuke. It's really useful for me to compare iterations and all the stuff I do in Unreal. These are my 2 screenshots I just take. I will go back to Unreal and I will maybe move one thing there. I'm going to get into my directional light and just change it to like something 5. It doesn't change a lot, it doesn't. But if I hit F9 and I go back here and on my second node I put the new screenshot, now you see that this moved right there. So if I compare the 2, I have 1 and 2, 1 and 2. So this switch between the 2 renders. I did change the light as well, and there's not much of a difference. But if I go back and tweak the directional light again, make it 2 instead, and screenshot, the adaptation it was keeping on. So unfortunately, that's why first week didn't work. So now you can see that there's a clear difference of pixels of light between the two renders. Tip number 6. When you have a lot of things in your scene, you might want to select a bunch of them very fast. So if you hold Ctrl-Alt, you can actually select a lot of things at the same time. But be aware, it does select everything that is behind what you want to select. You can add to that selection with Ctrl-Alt-Shift and add to selections. Tip number 7. There is a very important tips I learned back then is when you duplicate something, you have multiple options to do while you are doing the duplication. So if you hold Alt while moving an asset, it will duplicate it like so. So I can just do this while holding Alt, and it's worked as a charm. If you hold Alt and Shift, you will move the camera with the duplication. which can be very useful if you want to keep your camera going and don't want to actually move your camera again. That's very useful. Tip number 8. So many times this will happen. You will work on a very, very dark scene and you will want to see something while not really touching any lights because you don't want to change the lighting or for some reason. So one thing you can do is to go on the top left corner of your viewport, and on the bottom you have some options for your exposure. So game settings, EV100. Game setting means that if enabled, it uses the game settings, so your exposure of the game. So if you uncheck that, it becomes way darker. That is because the EV of the viewport is now 1. If I bring it to maybe -5, now the exposure is very, very bright. So I can see what I'm doing, and I did not change any lights at all. So if I want to get back, I go there and game settings, and now it's going back to normal as is intended for the game or the shot you're working on. Tip number 9. One more and we're done. When you are transforming something, you have multiple options on the top right corner of your viewport. So respectively, this is the grid for the transform. It's going to snap to 10 values. This is the snapping tool for the angle of the object. This is the scaling tool, and this little guy here cycles the transform gizmo coordinate systems between world and local. So if I move this here and I rotate that like this, you see that my gizmo, my rotation point is still like, it's not going in the right direction, right? So if I click here, now I have my transforms following the local transforms, my pivot following the local transforms of the object that I did. And if I just remove the snapping tool for rotation, then I have a free rotation. Tip number 10, the last tips that I use on a daily basis in Unreal. It's a very, very nice way to troubleshoot along the work that you're doing. So if you go at the bottom of Unreal into the little search bar called Enter Console Command, you can do stat FPS, and in your viewport on the right corner, you're gonna get like the FPS and the milliseconds that you have in your scene. But this is not a lot of information. If you want more information, you can use stat units, and I never write it the right way the first time. And now you have frame, game, draw, ray hit, GPU time, dynamic res, draws, and prints. So those you can go into the Unreal documentation. There's the description for them. But now you have pretty much the base settings that you want to monitor while you are working on a game, on a level for a game or for a virtual collection or a VFX shot. So that's it. Thank you everyone for watching my very first video. Sorry if you did not understood something. My first language is French, so I did my best. I hope it's going to be better on the way. If you have any questions or you want a video to explain something specific, you can do the request in the comment below, and I will try to make these kind of video as personal as possible. You know, if you have any questions about anything Unreal related, if I can answer, I will be really happy to help. And yeah, so take care, and maybe see you next time.